Hiyuki and Denia finally had more of their animations officially revealed by Kuro Games, and I think the level up in animation quality is getting seriously obvious. Looking at Denia alone, we can already see that we're most likely going to get the first ever sub-DPS character that has 2 ultimate animations. But before I get too ahead of myself, let's talk about Hiyuki first, since her animations were the firsts in the video. Now, when I first saw Hiyuki, I thought I knew what I was gonna expect from her. I thought a lot of Virgil bait, with a lot of Judgment Cut references, and a lot of those very quick cuts that characters like Virgil are known for. And let's just say, I did get that, but I also got more than I was expecting. For example, in what seems like her final basic attack, she ends up using a bow, which seems to be a reference to one of the possible futures that Hiyuki is able to see with her forte. In Hiyuki's splash art, we see that one of her possible futures has her being an archer, so maybe she saw that and decided to pick up the bow for a bit. Now, I'm assuming that the only things we were able to see was some sort of forte attack, her basic attacks, her 2 ultimates, and her basic attack during her ultimate, so no skills or anything. So I do hope that in the rest of her animations, some other weapon types are utilized to really emphasize this idea of Hiyuki looking into her possible futures so she can see how she's supposed to wield a certain type of weapon. For example, having a heavy attack pull out a naginata, or an aerial attack pull out nunchaku would be very cool in my opinion, but I'm not gonna get my hopes up. Now when we get to her ultimate, there's one thing I really like about it, and that is the custom snow effects that are created around the battlefield when Hiyuki is in her ultimate state. I really like snowy areas, which is why areas like Mount Firmament and the Frostlands are some of my favorites in the game. I just think snow is incredibly cozy and comfy. So the gentle snowfall during Hiyuki's ultimate is something that I am quite a fan of. But more importantly, her movement during her ultimate is absolutely out the wazoo. I really like characters that feature a ton of movement. Characters like Brant or games like Ultra Kill are some of my favorite in the entire world, so having Hiyuki be this mobile during her ultimate is definitely something I appreciate. It also means that she is most likely not going to have any sort of trouble when it comes to catching up to enemies, and she seemingly also has aerial attacks, so enemies that go into the air like the Nameless Explorer or the Impermanence Heron are definitely not going to be safe from Hiyuki, which is very convenient. Melee characters always end up having pretty mediocre matchups against aerial enemies, so Hiyuki having these aerial attacks is very nice for her. During her ultimate, her color scheme also seems to change a bit, going from primarily white and red to going to white and blue. I don't know the story significance of this transformation, but it's still pretty nice to have the 2 contrasting forms. We also get a look at what is seemingly a forte heavy attack, where she creates a big wave of ice and then slashes it down as she sheathes her blade. And I'm not the only one who got reminded of Sanhua by this, right? Sanhua is a very cool character in my opinion to this day, so anything that looks like Sanhua is automatically going to be cool. Hiyuki does obviously do it better, being a 5-star and all, because she gets a dynamic camera angle and the scale is much bigger. There's also a frozen branch that adds to the depth of the animation. And then for her ultimate finisher, I think it's primarily good, but I feel like the ending needs to be more climactic. We see the impact frames, but then it still lingers on that screen for a bit. I think the ultimate would be a lot better if after the impact frames, it would see the screen shattering and you returning to combat, rather than staying there for another half a second. That extra half a second of just sitting there looking at the screen really takes away from the finality that the impact frames are supposed to bring. But aside from that, I think the ultimate finisher looks great. Then we move on to Denia. Denia is the character I'm a lot more excited about because I really like her design. And while we didn't get much for Denia, what we did get was still very good in my opinion. We got like 1 or 2 basic attacks in her base form that feature her using a device to create bubbles. Then we got her first ultimate, what seems to be approximately 3 basic attacks during her ultimate form, and then her ultimate finisher. And I'm really curious, at this point, does Kuro Games regret not making a water element? Between Cantarella, Cardothea, Yuno, and now Denia, we seem to have a lot of characters with water theming. So I'm curious if Kuro regrets not making a water element. because I feel like if we had a water element, we would have a lot of characters in there already. Maybe they do that in the future. But first, looking at the first two basic attacks in Denia's base form, I think they look really good. Her water VFX are definitely the best in the game in my opinion. However, I wouldn't be shocked if we don't end up seeing these basic attacks much, and mainly prioritizing her ultimate. Speaking of which, that's the next thing we see. We already saw her ultimate from the Xbox announcement, but now we get more of a closer look at it, and also we get to see the ending. I was concerned that the ultimate was going to end a little too fast when I first saw it, but seemingly it does not. Although while the animation is long enough for me, my problem this time comes from the lack of weight or impact. When the two hands crush together, I don't really feel much, which I feel like I should be feeling a lot more from someone who is seemingly resonating with Aleph. But what I do find interesting is her English voice line during this attack. While in her base form, she apparently says please don't, and then in her void form, she says forgive me. Now there are two possible ways to read this. Either Denia has two personalities, one of which is afraid of the other, and the other one is seemingly sorry for what they're about to do, and then the other theory is that Denia is asking us to not forgive her for unleashing the power of Aleph 1. Both theories seem equally interesting and equally likely to me, so I don't really mind which one ends up being true. Or maybe Kuro Games even ends up surprising me, I would not know, I'm not one of their employees. Then we get some attacks during the ultimate form. I think the first two are basic attacks utilizing the claws, and then the big slam I think is her skill during this mode. My issues of these attacks are basically the same as the first ultimate, where I feel like there's not enough weight behind the attacks. But again, it might end up feeling better in game. I wouldn't know. But what I really want to pay attention to at this current moment is the model for the Void Denia, which it looks absolutely incredible. I really like how the black hole in space imagery is integrated into Denia's base design. Denia's base design doesn't feature much space themery outside of the stars on her hair, so seeing that black hole imagery woven into the base design so naturally and with such elegance is incredibly impressive in my opinion. Then we get to see her second liberation. I think it's a lot less climactic than the first liberation, which is really ironic because this one is supposed to be the climax to your rotation. And while I do very much like the first part of it, I feel like it ends too fast. It doesn't give you a lot of time to really see what's happening, and the abrupt transition into Denia's base form is, well, pretty abrupt. So I think this animation could definitely do with some work during the beta. But the skeleton of a really good animation is there. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think of them down below, and while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, you should join my Discord, which is linked down in the description. But that'll be all from me. Peace.